Later, a number of policy initiatives are taken which have either enlarged the scope of agriculture or they are intended to create more rural employment to stop the urban migration in Indian society. So there are so many agriculture related policies. Among them, the Small Farmers Development Agency, the National Rural Employment Program, Rural Landless Employment Guarantee Program, Jawahar Rozgar Yojana, National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme are some of the policy initiatives taken by the Indian government soon after the independence. What are the aims and objectives of the agriculture policy? This include the aim of agriculture policy is to encourage the farmers to use technology in the agricultural operations. The use of technology in the place of age-old methods of cultivation is the first and foremost objective of Indian government so that the agriculture yield will be increased and it will be multiplied. Coupled with this, the agricultural arable land or cultivable land, the extent of the cultivable land will also be increased. So National Agriculture Policy has an important component of emphasizing on the use of technology in agriculture. This is one of the main objectives of National Agriculture Policy. So this is to enhance the use of technology in Indian society. Secondly, the Indian Agriculture Policy is intended to bring land reforms in the Indian society. If we take the land holding history of India before the independence, we can know that a good amount of land was in the hands of landlords, zamindars, jagirdars, mahalwars, and big farmers. So that's how the land was locked up in the hands of the big farmers who were either cultivating very narrowly by following the conventional methods or keeping good extent of land uncultivated. So as a result of the concentration of land in the hands of big farmers and jagirdars and zamindars, the agricultural production was not a satisfactory level. So Indian government wanted to bring land reform policy soon after the independence. This policy enabled the government to take the surplus land from the big farmers and redistribute the land to landless laborers, small farmers, and marginal farmers, so that the extent of a cultivable land will be increased and agricultural production in turn will also be increased. So, the second important objective of agriculture policy is to introduce land reforms in agriculture. Land reform policies were made both by the central government and also by the state government, and various state governments have introduced land reform legislations in their respective states, and they tried to implement the land reforms and by keeping a rational limit of wetland and dry land in the hands of farmers, and it limited the extent of land that is to be owned by each farmer so that it has identified a large chunk of surplus land in the hands of big farmers and transferred that land to the landless laborers and small farmers and marginal farmers. So this is called as the Land Reform Act. The land reforms pursued by state governments and central government was aimed at increasing the agricultural production as part of the national agricultural policy. So the first one is to enhance the use of technology in agriculture. Secondly, to initiate the land reform policy. And thirdly, cooperative farming and consolidating of land holdings. Cooperative farming and consolidation of land holdings is another important objective of the national agriculture policy. So, national agriculture policy intended that there should be cooperative farming so that the agricultural inputs will be used by all the farming community in a cooperative manner, and both in operations and also use of inputs, cooperation among the farmers is encouraged so as to increase the productivity and the high yield of each and every food grain production. So this is another important aspect of land reforms and agricultural policy. And fourthly, credit facilities and institutional finance. Increase in credit facilities and institutional finance is also another important aspect. In fact, the farmers uh, traditionally have the habit of procuring finance only by themselves, not depending on any institutions for finances. But due to the failure of the agriculture in successive years, the farming community was not in a position to invest huge sums of money on agriculture. So the government has taken various initiatives by ordering the banks to finance the farmers, particularly the small farmers and marginal farmers, in terms of agricultural investment. So the finance was made available to the farming community so that the farmers can never go for private loans. Once they go to private loans, they may involve themselves in debt trap, and the whole agriculture yield will be swayed away by the private money lenders during the times of agricultural yieldings. So this is how making available the institutional finance is another important aspect of agriculture policy. And banks were directed to provide credit facility to the farming community. And this has become materialized since the government has nationalized the banks in 1969 and 1971. So when the banks are nationalized, the farming community got so many opportunities to have credit facilities from various institutions of finance, particularly the nationalized banks. And the government also instituted one nationalized bank called NABARD, National Agriculture Bank for Development, Rural Development, and it could finance the banks for financing the small farmers and marginal farmers in various rural areas. So these are all the institutional initiatives that were taken by the central government and state governments to enhance the credit facilities for the small farmers and marginal farmers. And they have initiated these steps for the institutional finance. So this is the fourth important objective of the Indian agriculture policy. The first one is to emphasize on use of technology by all the agriculturists, ranging from small farmers to middle farmers to big farmers. All the farmers were advised to use technology vigorously in the agricultural operation so that the productivity and the rates of yield, agriculture yield will be increased. And agricultural production, particularly the food grain production, will be increased. So this is one thing. Secondly, The government has initiated land reforms, a policy that initiated by central government and state government on the rational use of land and putting limit on each farmer to hold ownership on a particular piece of land. So the government has fixed an amount of land, wetland and dry land, to be owned by each and every farmer. And beyond the authorized amount of land, the other land is considered as a surplus land, and that is taken away by the government, and that land is to be distributed to agricultural laborers, landless laborers, small farmers, and marginal farmers. So this is how formulating the Land Reforms Acts and implementing land reforms is another important objective or initiative of the National Agriculture Policy. And thirdly, cooperative farming and consolidating national holdings, land holdings, is another important aspect. And cooperative farming is introduced, and the farmers are encouraging. The government has encouraged the farming community to cooperate among themselves, both in the use of agricultural inputs and also in undertaking the agricultural operation jointly by various farmers in the name of cooperative farming. So this will also increase the agricultural production. And fourthly, the government has initiated the credit facility and institutional finance for the farmers. So by extending the credit facility to all the farming community, irrespective of the amount of land that they are owning, that means marginal farmers, small farmers, middle farmers, or big farmers, every farmer is eligible to acquire credit from the nationalized banks. To this purpose, the government has initiated the nationalization process of all the banks. This process started in 1969 and it continued till 1971. Many banks are nationalized and all the banks are instructed by the central government to undertake the credit availability facility to all the farming communities. This is called as providing institutional credit to the rural agricultural communities. And previously, this credit facility was extended by private money lenders. So farmers used to rely on private money lenders for credit facilities to acquire agricultural investment. As a result of dependence on private credit money lenders, the farming community was pushed into debt trap, rural indebtedness, and there is a lot of violence also, and some of the farmers even committed suicides due to the non-payment of dues, credit to the money lenders, and high-handedness of the money lenders in capturing all the agricultural inputs of the farmers for not paying the credit in time. So to avoid all these things, the government has initiated the institutional credit, institutional finance for the rural farming communities. This is another important development that agricultural policy has acquired. And fifthly, support prices and procurement. Providing minimum support price for each and every agricultural product is the policy, is an integral policy of national agricultural policy. We have food grains production. Within the food grains, we have rye, wheat, sugarcane, cotton, edible oils. So these are the various food grains, cereals. Uh, all these food grains have the minimum support price from the government. The agriculture policy has assured that for every agricultural product, some minimum support price, that is called as MSP. MSP should be guaranteed so that the farmers cannot by themselves market their products, and they cannot sell away their product at a very lower price. So the agricultural marketing facilities are there, and the government also has instituted primary agricultural marketing societies, and these societies have procured food grains from the farmers, and it was in turn bought, purchased by a Food Corporation of India and other agencies, other government agencies. So this is how support price and procurement is also an integral part of Indian agriculture policy. And again, subsidies for agriculture. Subsidies to agriculture is also another important aspect. These subsidies are of different types. One is uh, subsidies on inputs. Subsidies on inputs like power, electricity. Many state governments are providing free power to farmers. So that is a kind of a subsidy the government is providing. And subsidies on fertilizers and pesticides. So that is another important subsidy the government is giving. And subsidies on seeds. So that's also an agricultural input. And subsidies on purchase of agricultural inputs, implements. So like sprayers, plows, and various agricultural implements are there. So agricultural machinery, the government is giving subsidy on the purchase of these agricultural implements. So, and the government is also providing export facilities, export subsidies to agricultural commodities. So this is how the subsidies ranging from the fertilizers and pesticides to minimum support price to subsidies on agricultural inputs, agricultural implements, export subsidies. So various types of subsidies are provided, and the government has taken the burden of, it tried to ease the burden of purchasing the agricultural inputs by farmers, and it has provided them with reasonable prices. So this is also another important initiative taken by central government. So subsidies to agriculture is the sixth one. And lastly, rural employment schemes are also implemented. And among these rural employment schemes, the Small Farmer Development Agency and Rural Employment Guarantee Programs and Rural Landless Employment Guarantee Program, Jawahar Rozgar Yojana. So these are various programs. In the recent past, the government also has introduced the crop insurance and Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. So these are all the various programs and policies that to share the burden of the farmers and wanted to provide relief to the farming communities. So these are the seven measures. These are the seven objectives of agriculture policy in India. The seven objectives include, the first one is to enhance the use of technology in agriculture by farming communities. Secondly, to introduce the land reforms in different states by state governments and central government. And thirdly, to cooperate, to increase the cooperative farming and consolidate the land holdings. And fourthly, credit facility and institutional finance, making credit facilities and institutional finance available to all the farmers, and extending support prices and procurement. And again, sixth one is subsidies to agriculture in different forms. Subsidies on agricultural inputs, subsidies on fertilizers and pesticides, subsidies on agricultural inputs, implements, even agricultural technology, and subsidies on exports of agricultural products and so on. And lastly, the government also taken initiative to guarantee rural employment schemes besides agriculture. The rural employment guarantee programs are introduced so as to prevent the farmers to switch to other sectors of economy and stick on to agriculture and not to migrate from rural areas to urban areas. There are a lot of trends of urban migration in India after independence, and many farmers have uh, stopped agricultural operations and shifted to other sectors of economy like service sector, industrial sector, trade and commerce, and so on. So the government wanted to encourage the farmers not to migrate to rural urban areas from rural areas. So urban migration is to be checked. So that's why the government has initiated the National Rural Employment Guarantee Program is also started. So these are the measures that were taken by the central government as part of national agriculture policy. And these are the objectives of national agriculture policy. So national agriculture policy again is formulated in 2000 year, the year 2000. On 28th July 2000, the government of India announced national agriculture policy. And meanwhile, in 19 late 60s, the government also has come out with uh, the green revolution strategies to enhance the production and to increase the cultivable area in agriculture. So this has led to green revolution. M.S. Swaminathan is considered as the father of green revolution in India. So he has suggested the government to introduce certain new varieties which are known as high yielding varieties. So they are introduced in agriculture and the agriculture production is multiplied so that the rural poverty is answered and also rural unemployment is also solved. So the agricultural revolution that's called as the green revolution as part of the government policy of high yielding varieties, introducing high yielding varieties in the agricultural production. So the new agricultural policy again is introduced in the year 2000 and it has also certain objectives. It has the importance to be given to evolve new local specific and economically viable improved varieties of farm and horticulture, crops, livestock, species, and aquaculture is the main important objective. And besides this, to envisage minimize the price fluctuations and commodities market and electrification, rural electrification, and encouraging farmers to use electricity for the agricultural activities is also another important aspect of rural national rural agriculture policy. And national agriculture policy has yielded so many results. Some of the positive results that India has registered are very outstanding. In fact, in food grain production, India stands in the first position in the world in food grains production. It has crossed some 330 million tons a year. It is due to the green revolution and introduction of high yielding varieties in agriculture sector. And besides this, uh, many farmers have introduced the genetically modified varieties of seeds to multiply their agricultural yield. And moreover, the cultivable area and the area of arable area of cultivation is also tremendously increased. And this had even created more jobs in the agriculture sector. And further, it has stopped uh, the urban migration from rural areas. It has virtually stopped the urban migration from rural areas and it has guaranteed rural employment guarantee in the rural areas. So these are some of the initiatives taken by the central government in the agriculture sector, and the government is time and again reviewing its agriculture policies and facilitating more and more funds to the agricultural farming communities. And there is also a disheartening trend of farmer suicides in many parts of the country a decade back. But the government has come out with new subsidies regime, and this has stopped the trend. This has checked the trend of suicides. And now the farmers are guaranteed with the minimum support price, minimum procurement price, and they are also guaranteed with market facilities. Agricultural market facilities are also there, and the farmers are also given the credit facilities. The institutional credit facilities are also there. And in some states like Telangana, the rural credit is waived off by the government. And the rural credit, particularly the farming community that took credit for agricultural investment, is waived off in the recent past. And agricultural community is given more and more facilities for rural credit. So this is only to bring back the farmers from the brink of rural indebtedness and saving the farming community from uh, indebtedness of the money lenders in rural areas. So these are some of the objectives of the National Agriculture Policy, and it has certain objectives. The first one is to emphasize on the use of technology in agriculture. Secondly, to initiate land holdings, land reforms in the agriculture sector. And thirdly, to initiate cooperative farming and consolidation of land holdings. And fourthly, to make available the credit facilities and institutional finance to the farmers. And fifthly, to ensure support prices and procurement. And sixth one is subsidies in agriculture. And seventh one is rural employment guarantee schemes. And besides these initiatives, the central government in the recent past has come out with crop insurance programs. Crop insurance programs are also extended to the farming community. By any chance, if the farmer is not in a position to get his yield in spite of his hard work for agricultural activity to get the yield due to natural calamities or any other reason, if the farmer fails to get his yield properly, the government has assured the farming community with an insurance policy called the Farmers Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana program is out. So this is how the farming community is assured of investment, marketing facilities, technology, availability of agricultural inputs, and agricultural finance. So these are some of the objectives of national agriculture policy that is introduced in India in the soon after the independence. Now let us see what are the industrial policies that are there in India. In India, the British government has initiated the industrialization. In fact, Britain is the first country to have achieved the great industrial revolution in the world. And England is known as the workshop of the world because England was the first country to achieve industrial revolution in 18th and 19th centuries. So extending the components of industrial revolution, the British government has introduced some of the industries and encouraged private investors to introduce some of the industries in India. But that could not yield much benefit to India. But soon after independence, the Indian government has taken so many initiatives that have resulted in a kind of an industrial revolution in India, and the Indian government by itself has established so many industries with the huge finances, and the government also motivated the private sector to introduce and to invest in private industries. So the first industrial, actually there are three industrial policy resolutions that have come in India. The first one is the Industrial Policy Resolution in 1948. The second one is Industrial Policy Resolution in 1956. And the third one is New Industrial Policy in 1991. These are the three notable policies on industries. Let me repeat. The first one is the Industrial Policy Resolution 1948. The secondly, Industrial Policy Resolution 1956. And thirdly, New Industrial Policy of 1991. So these are the three important policy initiatives taken by the central government on enhancing the industrial capacities and extending industrialization in India. The first policy, let us discuss these policies one after the one. The first one is Industrial Policy Resolution 1948. And this policy is introduced soon after the independence, and it has categorized the industries into three types. The first one is the state-run industries, the state-owned industries. The second one is the mixed sector industries. And the third one is uh, the area or field of government control. So these are the, and fourth one is area of private sector. So industries, there are different types of industries like heavy industries, uh, middle industries, and industries with low investment, and household industries, cottage industries. So based on the level of investment, industries can be categorized into three, four types. So the first one is state-owned industries. So these industries are owned only by the government. There is no private investment, and the government did not want any private investment in these industries in 1948, soon after the independence. So these industries include the public sector undertakings, particularly the arms and ammunition, atomic energy, railway transport, and others. So these industries are only owned by the government. The government did not allow the private sector to enter into these industries because it involves huge investment. The government has introduced with thousands of crores of industry of rupees of investment in these industries. That's why they are called as the heavy industries. And these are also called as the state-owned industries. For example, in India, we have Bharat Heavy Electricals Limited, Indian Railways, and Electronics Corporation of India Limited, Hindustan Aeronauticals Limited, HAL, HCL, IDPL, HAL, BDL, Indian Railways, BHEL, ECL. So these are the companies that has that have attracted thousands of crores of rupees from the government as investment. So they are called as the state-owned industries. This is the first category of industries. The second category of industries are mixed category, mixed sector industries. Mixed sector industries are those industries in which both private and public sector, government and private sector, jointly own the industries. And coal and steel, aircraft manufacture, shipbuilding, manufacturers of telephones, telegraph, and wireless. So these are some of the mixed sector industries in which the private sector investment is also included and invited. The private investments are also invited. And thirdly, area or field of government control. So the government used to control the whole industry. So that is related to the automobile industry, heavy chemicals, heavy machinery, machine tools, fertilizers, electrical engineering, sugar, paper, cement, cotton, and woolen textiles. So these are the industries which are owned by and controlled by the government. So the government used to pass regulations and rules to control these industries were under strict supervision from the government. So these are some of these industries are also owned by the private sector, but the government have a strict control over these industries, and even the prices of these industrial products are also controlled by the government. So this is, and likewise the area of private sector. In the private sector, uh, different categories of industries were included. So this is how there are four types of industries in the 1948 resolution. The first one is the state-owned industries. The second one is the mixed sector industries. And the third one is state-controlled industries. And fourth one is area of private sector industries. The four types of industries that are there. And if we, in 1951, the Industrial Development Regulation Act is also formulated by the central government. The Industries Development and Regulation Act 1951 was passed by Parliament to regulate the process of industrial development in the country. This is known as the Industrial Development and Regulation Act 1951. And this act came into force in 1952. And it was intended to regulate the private sector. How to regulate private sector? So regulation of industrial investment and production as per the plan priorities and targets, protection of small entrepreneurs against the competition of large entrepreneurs, and avoiding concentration of and monopoly of ownership of industries, and balanced regional development. These are the objectives of the Senate. And again in the year 1956, another important policy initiative was taken. This is called as Industrial Policy Resolution 1956. That means some 10 years after the independence, a new industrial policy resolution was introduced in India. This industry policy has categorized the industries into three types. The first one is exclusive state monopoly of industries. This is the first one. And secondly, mixed sector or private sector in enterprise. And thirdly, uh, only private sector industries. So these are the three types of industries that are there in 1956 resolution. First one is the only exclusive state monopoly. There is no initiative of private sector. The private sector is barred. The private sector is rejected in these type of industries. These industries include, the government has identified some 17 industries in this. Among them, the arms and ammunition, atomic energy, railway, and air transport are some of the industries in which private sector investments were barred. Private sector was stopped in these industries. Only government sector. The government only has invested thousands of crores of rupees as investment in these industries. So they are called as the exclusive state monopoly industries. These industries are owned only by the government. They are the monopoly of the government. So that's why they're called as exclusive state monopoly industries. And the second type of industries are called as mixed sector industries. In a mixed sector industry, both the private sector and public sector, they jointly own the industries. That's called as the mixed sector industries. Among the mixed sector industries, minerals, roads, transport, sea transport, machine tools, ferroalloys, tools, steels, drugs, dyestuffs, plastics, antibiotics, fertilizers, synthetic rubber, chemical palm, carbonization of coal, aluminum, and other non-ferrous metals. So these are all owned by both private sector and also public sector. So there is private-public partnership is there in the industries. They are jointly owned both by the central government and state government. Sorry, the government and also private sector. So this is called as the mixed sector. In the mixed sector, the investment, part of the investment is given by the state, the government, and part of the investment is borne by the private sector. So this is called as the mixed sector. So in the mixed sector, the industries are owned by, both have the ownership rights on the industries, particularly the minerals, road transport, sea transport, machine tools, ferroalloys and tool steels, drugs, dyestuffs, plastics, antibiotics, fertilizers, synthetic rubber, chemical palm, carbonization of coal and aluminum and other non-ferrous metals. So these are the industries which are under mixed sector industries. In the mixed sector industries, the investment is partly borne by the government and part of it is borne by the private sector. So this is mixed sector. And the third one is the private sector, pure private sector, in which the private sector is encouraged and private investments are encouraged and private sector got financed by various banks. There are also industrial finance banks, and these private sector industries have control by the government, and private sector is also exclusive ownership rights only on private sector ownership. So these include the state recognizes the private participation and initiative in the private sector. So sometimes the state also can make a supervision of private sector. So there is control of government on private sector. At the same time, the private sector is also given freedom to have production, expansion, marketing, and various other facilities. So this is how the Industrial Policy Resolution of 1956 have categorized industries into three types. The first one is exclusive state monopoly industries. The second one is mixed sector of public and private enterprises. And thirdly, justification of private sector. So these are the three important divisions, classification of industries in the 1956 policy resolution. Again, during the times of globalization, liberalization, privatization, the government has come out with a new industrial policy resolution in 1991. This is called as New Industrial Policy in 1991. We must understand the context in which this industrial policy is introduced. In 1991, the finance minister Manmohan Singh and the prime minister P.V. Narasimha Rao, they have introduced uh, the liberalization policies. They have liberalized some of the policies introduced in the post-independence period, in the early years of post-independence period. And the economy is liberalized, and they have also converted some of the public sector undertakings into private sector. And they have also introduced uh, private doctor, foreign direct investment in some of the industries of major industries. So this is how the new industrial policy of 1991 is considered as a landmark in the industrial policy resolutions of India that has liberalized the economy, liberalized the industrial policies, liberalized the industrial sector from the clutches of bureaucratic control and it is known as the liberalized industrial policy resolution. The new industrial policy resolution, industrial policy 1991, it has certain important characteristics. The first one is it has liberalized the industrial licensing. Previously, the licensing was so tough that private sector used to move earth and heaven to get private industrial licenses. But now, a new liberalized policy regime has come and it has introduced many steps to liberalize procuring the industrial licenses. So industrial licensing was liberalized. That is the first and foremost important aspect of industrial policy regulation. The second one is public sector policy. In the public sector policy, the government has thoroughly reviewed the performance of public sector undertakings. And the public sector units which are running into losses are considered as white elephants, and the government wanted to sell away these sectors to private sector. So that is called a disinvestment. The government has introduced a new policy called disinvestment of public sector. So it tried to withdraw the investments, public investments, and allowed the private investments into these areas. So this is called as policy of disinvestment. And policy of disinvestment has yielded so many results that huge sums of amounts of public money, which was otherwise wasted due to the losses in public sector units, was drastically reduced and public money is saved. So this is how the disinvestment policy has come as a part of public sector policy. So the public sector industries which are giving benefits and profits are called as the Navaratna industries, and these were given by protection by the government. And the industries which are running into losses were disinvested, and the government started selling away the investment to private sector investment. So this is a major policy change in the government public sector policy. And thirdly, the MRTP Act, the Monopoly Trade Practices Act, which was introduced to regulate monopoly and avoid monopoly of certain industries, was also liberalized. And this act is liberalized and its provisions are liberalized. This is another part. And fourthly, the foreign investment and technology are invited. Foreign investment is invited. The foreign direct investment in various sectors like life insurance, insurance sector, transport sector, uh, basic infrastructure sector, shipbuilding, railways, and irrigation. So in all these sectors, the private investments, institutional investments, and foreign direct investments are introduced, are invited, and the parliament has allowed the foreign direct investment into these areas also. So this has facilitated the availability of funds for the private sector industries, particularly the industries which are in want of money for the expansion of their projects. So investment, foreign direct investment was made available to various service sector industries and also manufacturing sector industries. And likewise, the foreign technology was also introduced, and some of the industries are allowed to have memorandum of understanding with many multinational companies or the transfer of technology transfer. So this is how technology is also made available to the people, particularly the private sector industries. With the availability of technology to the private sector started developing the machinery in accordance with the advancements in technological growth, technological advancement, and it started establishing new industrial units with sophisticated technologies, modern technologies. As a result, the industrial production is increased, and also the industries have generated a lot of employment facilities for the youth, for the unemployed youth. So these are the four important aspects that are part of new industrial policy in 1991. The first one is industrial licensing is liberalized. And secondly, the public sector policy was reviewed so that the public sector units, which are otherwise getting thousands of crores of rupees of government investment and running into losses, were identified by the government as white elephant industries. And these industries were started the process of disinvestment. The government started disinvestment process in these industries so that the investment proposals of private industries are encouraged in this. And thirdly, the MRTP Act to regulate the Monopoly Trade Practices Act, which is otherwise a very tough act against monopoly industries, was liberalized and the government has regulated this act. And fourthly, the foreign investment and technology is facilitated to the public sector and private sector industries. Both public sector and private sector started inviting the foreign direct investment, foreign institutional investment, domestic institutional investment, and private sector investments were invited, and the government accordingly gave permission. Some some of the sectors like insurance sector, civil aviation sector, pharma sector got the sanction right from the parliament itself as a matter of policy resolution. Uh, the Indian pharma policy was introduced, and pharma industry was allowed to take foreign direct investment. Like aviation policy is introduced, and foreign direct investment is introduced. So likewise, various policies of other sectors are also liberalized so as to liberalize the industrial foreign direct investment into those industries. So this is a major step that the government has taken in the process of liberalization of Indian economy. And in the process of Indian economy liberalization, technology is also played a very important role. The government allowed technology transfer, and particularly from multinational companies and technologies of various advanced nations were allowed to flow into India at the cost of the industrial investment. And the new technologies were invited and allowed, and the government has liberalized the provisions relating to technology transfer. So these are some of the initiatives taken by the Indian government. So friends, a public policy with regard to agriculture and industry is a very comprehensive policy that is related to many other policies. Once an agriculture policy is to be evolved, it has to look into the farmers' problems, the employment guarantee schemes of rural areas, the rural infrastructure facilities, the Panchayat Raj institutions. So it is related to very many interconnected areas. Likewise, when the government try to formulate industrial policy, it has to look into national employment position and national foreign direct investment position, technology transfer position, export and import policy position, and monetary policy position, manufacturing policy position. Likewise, it is related to many other policies. So broadly, these two policies, the agriculture policy and industrial policy, are started with strict socialistic goals in the pre-independence period. But over a period of time, they have acquired the nature of liberalized policies. Agriculture policy was liberalized, industrial policy was liberalized, and they were brought to uh, the globalization, liberalization, privatization, LPG framework, and these policies were liberalized so as to make the benefits of these policies available to millions of people in India. So thank you, friends. In tomorrow's class, we'll be discussing on national reservation policies.